Hello, everyone. This is Brian O'Haron speaking. I'd like to begin this program, Spreading the Word, number 3, with a little discussion about my own background at Highland Lake in Winsted, Connecticut. When I was a young boy, living in Torrington, Connecticut with my brother Dennis, my mother and father couldn't afford a cottage at Highland Lake, so they would take us to all the local beaches around the area, ponds, lakes, ocean, etc., for a day or two each summer. Once in a while, we would come to Highland Lake and visit a local beach. We usually got here early in the morning and spend most of the day, even before we could swim, playing in the water, etc. As I grew a bit older, my aunt and uncle, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Bruzy, around 1946 or so, purchased a cottage on Perch Rock Trail. It was an old summer cottage. He was a tool and die maker and could afford to have a cottage at Highland Lake. Well, we visited there, swam in the water, had picnics with our cousins from the O'Haron family. Later in life, I met my wife Joyce at Highland Lake at a friend's cottage, and eventually, when I was at Kansas University, we were married. I entered the computer business, and we traveled the world, living in many countries and many cities. In order to come home to the area we were born in and be with our parents on holidays so they could see the children and visit with us, we could visit with them, we needed a place to stay because we couldn't fit in their house anymore. They had small houses with not many bedrooms. So we purchased a cottage at Highland Lake in 1974 on Wakefield Boulevard. The cottage was very well built in about 1926. It only had one major owner before us, a man with 5 children from the Hartford area of Connecticut. I think he owned a furniture store of some sort. The cottage was built during the Depression. Very well built by many good craftsmen. It was on a non-conforming lot at that time. We didn't know it was non-conforming, but that's what it turned out to be. The cottage was very close to the neighbors on each side, although it had a lot of land towards the water, and a boathouse on the water that was as old as the cottage, and it was on cement piers with a huge cement pier in front of it on the lake side that was used for diving into the water. It was very tall. Over the years, we, as we could afford it from time to time, began to upgrade both the cottage and the boathouse. The cottage was a summer cottage when we bought it, and we spent a lot of time and money over the years making it into a year-round home with sewer and water. We put in insulation and wallboard and heat, a furnace. And then we ended up closing in the porch, the side porch, because it was beginning to rot during the winter from not being shoveled when people weren't here. We only used it pretty much in the summer. Our relatives used it when we weren't here, and we rented it out from time to time to make ends meet. My brother took care of all that with my sister-in-law. Eventually, we added a third floor with a game room because when the kids couldn't go in the water down by the lake, they liked to play in the game room. Close to my retirement, we added a front garage with a room over the top that we used to watch the lake and the environment. It had a lot of windows in it. We also added a porch that the town wouldn't let us cover because we were too close to our neighbors. Early in our ownership, we began to have problems with the boathouse, small boathouse, because the cement pier that was used for diving was being pushed by the ice onto the boathouse and was crushing it. So I hired some local people. We were traveling the world, probably living in Europe at the time. I hired some local contractors to obtain the permits, do the planning, and rebuild the boathouse. And when we rebuilt the boathouse, we added a deck and a second floor. And we had to lift the boathouse up, according to law at the time. We had to lift it up during an 8-foot drawdown on stilts, planks and things, blocks. And then we had to build the open first floor underneath and the lower deck underneath and a support for the building. The building on the second floor was closed in and had a porch around it with steps down to the first level and steps down to the road in the front. We had to build the second floor. My brother did most of it with a carpenter friend, wall by wall. We couldn't tear it down because it was over the water, so we had to take down one wall and rebuild it, and then do the second wall, and then the third wall, and then the fourth wall. When we initially had our permit, we couldn't close in the bottom, and we couldn't have a deck around one side of the boathouse. Because of vandalism and the need to repair things on the side that didn't have a deck, the local contractors finally got us permits to be able to add a deck on the side that didn't have one and to close in the bottom level. Over the years, we insulated the boathouse second floor, not the first floor. The first floor was used for storing lake-type things like skis and floats and all that kind of thing, tools, and still is. But the second floor, we put in insulation and all the things we needed to do to heat the place. And eventually, we ran water down from the cottage, and we installed the sewer. When the sewers were put around the lake, we installed the sewer in the boathouse so the kids wouldn't have to go up to the cottage. We also installed a phone so the kids wouldn't have to run across the road to go up to the cottage. This was all done over quite a few years. So the cottage was upgraded over many years, and the boathouse was upgraded over many years. And then eventually, when I retired, sold some properties in other states, friends of my childhood, the LaTulips, were trying to sell their property next door. And they had a dilapidated cottage built in 1908 down on the water. It was called Take It Easy. So I bought the property, Joyce and I bought the property, and we gave some of it in our name, so our house would be cottage, now a house would be conforming. To add a kitchen for Joyce. But the cottage on the bottom was on a separate land, and it is non-conforming. There was a statement in its deed that was put in by mistake that said that no cottage could ever be built on that piece of property. Of course, we were paying taxes on it, and there was a cottage there since 1908. So I went to the selectmen, explained the problem with my lawyer, and they reversed the decision that was in the deed. Because we already had a cottage, they said we could rebuild it, but according to the P&Z regulations, it had to be in the same footprint. So we tore the cottage down after we received the permission from everybody, and we built it to agreed plans, and we went up because we couldn't go sideways because of the planning and zoning regulations. At the same time as we went up, we decided to go up and add a bedroom and a bathroom in the boathouse, the old boathouse area. We still call it the boathouse, although it's not a boathouse anymore. Part of it is used that way. So now we have a nice cottage where the 1908 dilapidated cottage used to be. We have a nice boathouse that has a bedroom and a bath on the 3rd floor and a little kitchenette on the 2nd floor. They both have a lot of windows in them so you could see up and down the lake. And they are very, very interesting properties. The house itself we added to when we bought the property from the LaTulips. And we have a huge house with a beautiful kitchen and all the other things that go with it. We got a nice laundry room. We got a nice bedroom. We got a few big music room for me to practice my music. And we're very happy with that. We also added a 3-car garage, and we have an entrance around Vaughn's Lane so that people who are handicapped can easily get into the house. The house is designed, the new part of it, for handicapped people. Have wide doors, few steps, etc., etc. So anyway, over the years, we had a lot of interesting applications with P&Z. I wasn't here in the early days. I don't think we ever went to ZBA, but I'm checking into that now, and I'll try to find out the history of P&Z and ZBA. But it was an evolutionary process. And the reason it's an evolutionary process is because houses on the lake many years ago started out on small lots. This was before planning and zoning even existed, divided up by the builders, Mr. Moore and other people who built on the lake. And often they slept outside. The person who owned the cottage that was built in 1908 had 7 children. He had changing room outside and a little garage across the street. And often the children would sleep outside, and they would use the outhouses that were all over the lake. One, of course, in their own backyard. Well, times have changed since those days, and everybody on the lake, not everybody, but most people, are beginning to evolve their cottages into year-round homes. And these year-round homes are paying a lot of taxes to the town and giving a lot of enjoyment to their owners. The lake itself has had a lot of interesting changes over the years. It was raised 4 feet or so in 1860 to provide more water for the 80 factories that were being placed in town. It was raised again, I think, in 1960, give or take a little bit, for the boats. And the need for the walls in the lake became more and more important because if land washed away, you didn't have it anymore. So everybody that had to, that didn't have natural shale or rock leading to their lake from their property, built walls. So there's plenty of walls around the lake. And in the old days, the coves were pretty well empty. So now we have a problem. The coves are starting to fill in. The beaches were kind of washed away when we raised the water so much. And all lakes die over a very long period of time. Our lake is probably half dead now. We're losing some of the oxygen. We do throw poison in the lake once a year or so to kill the weeds, or some of the weeds anyway. And we put salt on the roads. We used to put sand there as well. Now we just live with salt. That kills trees and washes into the lake. So it's a very interesting situation. And recently, as you know now from this program and from the newspapers, etc., about 22 years ago, Planning and Zoning put in a section into the regulations, Section 10.6, to allow people to do things on their non-conforming properties that they couldn't do before. Recently, the Planning and Zoning Commission removed that section from the regulations, and they are in the process of coming up with a total new set of regulations that they say will be ready for public hearing in another few months, on or near September 20th, and then they'll go from there. If you have property in town and are concerned about this elimination of Section 10.6, you should schedule your time in such a way that you can attend the public hearing when it occurs on or around September 20th. You can also go to the P&Z meetings and see if you can ask questions, or you can contact Steve Sedlowski, the planning director, by email or by telephone or in person to ask him any questions that you may have. The next P&Z meeting is on August 8th in the town hall at about 7 o'clock. I would urge anybody that's interested to go there, or to obtain a voice copy of the meeting a few days after from the planning director. They will go to the selectmen first and then plan a public hearing about 40 days later. On or about September 20th. Put that on your calendars and be ready to attend the public hearing on or about that date. If enough signatures are on our petition, enough to make a difference with the Planning and Zoning Commission, we will present it to them at the public hearing, or perhaps a little before. If enough property owners from around town, Winchester and Highland Lake, attend the public hearing and express their views, that may make a difference. So you need to get prepared. I'll try to help you as much as I can. The planning director will as well. And perhaps we can have a very good public hearing next time with a lot of views presented by the property owners. I have been very active over the last week or so listening to voice recordings provided to me by the planning director of the last few meetings. I've been listening to those recordings and asking questions of Steve Sedlowski. And he's been very good at answering these questions. I'll tell you about some of them in this program. I've also been talking to residents and property owners all over the town of Winchester and the city of Winsted, including Highland Lake, and that gives me a good understanding of what people's concerns are about the rewriting, the total rewriting of these regulations that has been wanted for many, many years. We've had plans in the past for the town center and other places, and nothing has ever come of them. Probably because we couldn't afford to do anything, or through a lack of interest or change in political philosophies. So, encouraged by the feedback that I'm getting from day to day and week to week, I have been posing questions to Steve Sedlowski, and he has been giving me answers. There are still a few to come. But before I get to the questions, I want to deal with a couple of the bigger issues. I usually deal with Steve by email, although I am scheduling a meeting with him in the next week or so to see if I can have an hour or two discussion about these new regs and ask him a lot of questions at the high level to get a better feel or understanding for them. These regulations are many, many pages. I forget the exact number now, but I think it's 146 pages altogether. And they're kind of complex for the average person. But I like to ask high-level questions. For example, how many zones did we have in the current regs and how many will be in the new regs? Those kind of questions. And then I can drop down to a lower level if I need more specific information. And Steve, of course, does know these regulations and the proposed regulations pretty well. So he can answer me if he has the information. I try to get a copy of the voice-only recordings of each P&Z meeting as a few days after they're held. I'll try to edit those down. I just got some editing software so I can edit that voice recordings down and send them out to my email list. If you want to be on my email list, contact me and I'll add you to the distribution list. And I'll be able to send you these voice recordings and you can listen to them for yourself. It's not easy. It's not easy. It takes a long time. Some of the meetings last a couple hours. But I'm going to try to edit out everything except the regulation part of the meetings so we can all get a better understanding for what's going on in the P&Z Commission. It's not easy because some people mumble and some don't speak very loud at all. Others shout, so it's kind of hard. You got to listen very carefully, take notes while you're doing it. Then you get a better feel for things. I've been told that they don't have any public comment at these planning and zoning meetings, but they will let you speak if you have something to bring to their attention. I have done a few pretty big things in the last few days based upon my discussions with residents and my communications with Steve Sedlowski. I have filed a Freedom of Information Act asking for all people, residents, who have gone to ZBA and asked for a permit under Section 10.6 of the P&Z regulations over the last 22 years when it existed. It is no longer in existence, but something covering that aspect may be in the new regulations. I have also asked for a record of the decisions made at each of these permit applications with ZBA over the years. I'm hoping that I will get this information delivered to me before the public hearing on the new regulations in September, or about that time if it's delayed in any way. If it's not done, then the Citizens Committee may ask for a continuation of the public hearing until we do receive the information on the ZBA applications over the last 22 years on Section 10.6 of the P&Z regulations. When I get this information, if I do, I will distribute it widely to anyone interested in receiving a copy of this information. 636 East Wakefield Boulevard was the last, to the best of my knowledge, to receive an approval to do quite a bit of work using Section 10.6 of the P&Z regulations. They had a good engineer and a very good lawyer to help them get through planning and zoning, and they made it. They have permission to do the work that they were fighting for a year or a year and a half or so, and I'm sure it cost them quite a bit of money to get through the process. Some information has been released concerning the new regulations wording that should replace Section 10.6 in the new regulations. This has been distributed. We all have it. So I did ask Steve a question, which I haven't got an answer on yet, but I'm sure I will sooner or later. If 636 East Wakefield Boulevard applied for the same permits without Section 10.6, using the new regulation wording, would they get approval for their project? I'm waiting for his response, and I will tell you on the next program or the one after that whether I get one or not and what it is. It's a very interesting $1 million question. I'm trying to find out which of these people that succeeded under Section 10.6 will succeed in getting the same thing under the new regulations if they didn't apply before but are now going to apply, or similar people will apply with similar requirements for permits. An interesting portion of the regulations that will replace Section 10.6 is the insistence that you can only apply for a permit under these regulations once only, if you get permission. So I asked Steve if you could apply again, for example, to go up higher with your building some years after you got permission to go up to 18 feet expansion out towards the next property line, providing you're still within the allowed space. Steve's answer was yes, you can apply, or the next owners can apply, to go up, add a floor or two within the rules to your property, house or cottage, as long as you stay within the height limit in your area. And that the height limit is 30 feet to the center of the triangle at the top of the house. That's Pythagoras' theorem, not to the peak of the roof, as many people would think. By the way, before I go any further, I want to mention that we did look into the issue of the legality of the public hearing, and we found out that all the proper legal rules for having the public hearing were followed, so there was no need for an appeal by the Citizens Committee with legal assistance. So we are now applying all efforts to be prepared for the next public hearing for the change of the regulations that will happen in September. We're trying to spread the word, get as many people as possible up to speed so they will attend the public hearing and speak their mind. They will also have time to see if there's any work they want to have done on their property for their children or for the new owners that may come along in the next few years. And they can see whether these new regs will let them do it or not. And they can get their 2 cents in at the public hearing. I asked Steve, the planning director, if condos would be allowed, and he gave me an answer which is rather complex, but I'll try to get it across to you now. My question to Steve was, are you going to allow condo units? As far as I can see, especially at Highland Lake, the condos are doing no harm whatsoever, but they are providing homes for young people with children that can afford the smaller prices and smaller homes. Steve answered, as for condos, that is just an ownership style. The regs would only allow multifamily or multiple building residential housing under any form of ownership if it included affordable housing units. They could be condos or residential units. This arrangement would be allowed by special permit. Accessory apartments, i.e. in-law apartments, would also be allowed by special permit. I'm not sure whether that included Highland Lake or not. I'll double check with Steve this week. I asked Steve if the rest home on Lake Street could be sold for any other purpose than being a rest home, because I had heard some rumors to that effect. Steve answered that it was in the Highland Lake business zone, and by special permit, it could be any of the following. It could be a banquet facility, a pub, a bed and breakfast, a country inn, a club of some sort, a hotel, a public recreation facility, a recreation and entertainment facility, outdoor private, a restaurant, a retail convenience store, a retail grocery, small format, a retail personal service, etc., etc. He listed more than that. A small shop, a marine facility, boat sales, repairs. It could be a tap tasting room or a mixed-use building. The pin shop and other properties, the boat place, the car repair, that's the Jaguar place, the store, and whatnot across the road, and La Pointe's floor covering shop are proposed to be in the Highland Lake business zone. I asked Steve if the business zone was the same as the old commercial zone, but I haven't got an answer from him yet. That'll probably come pretty soon. Many people are not interested in any changes in the regulations because for one reason or another, they are being led to believe that most things will be grandfathered. That means they were there before the regulations changed. I asked Steve for a definition of the word grandfather as used in the P&Z and ZBA regulations. Now, you also know by now, probably, if you live in our town and city, that a hardship is not defined anywhere. If you go to the ZBA and you don't have a hardship or what the ZBA Commission considers to be a hardship, you will be turned down for your application for a permit. Now, many people have gone in the past, and I was told this by Joe Cadrain, who used to be on the ZBA Commission for many years. Brian, if you want something, just go around the lake and find out who has already got what you want. For example, a covered porch or a garage or something like that. List all those people, take some pictures, and go in and say, all these people got it. Why can't I get it? Are you discriminating against me? And you'll probably get it. Now, I know of one case on record where a person went in and got turned down by P&Z then turned down by ZBA, then turned down again by ZBA, but then went in and said, look, here's 8 other people that have already got this extension that I would like to have. So ZBA threw up their hands in disgust and granted permission for the person to make a conforming lot non-conforming with the addition of a garage and some living space above it. The meeting then adjourned, and one of the commissioners quit the Zoning Board of Appeals in disgust. So you might remember that. If you want something bad enough, you just go find all the people who did it, and you say, why can't I do the same thing? Why are you discriminating against me? Now, one of the examples of that is, at one time, they didn't want you to close in an open porch to make a living room out of it, or a bedroom, or anything else. But many people started to do it without permits. The thing got out of control, so other people began to say, why can they do it? And why can't I do it? Are you discriminating against me? And then, of course, all the other people had to be allowed to close in their porches as well. I know another individual that's been trying for years to get his small 4x4-foot set of stairs, the platform for the set of stairs, covered so that snow and ice doesn't get on it in the winter time, and somebody exiting or entering the house doesn't slip and break their neck. Well, that person and still has not got permission to cover his step. He didn't want to close it in. He just wanted a small 4x4 or so roof over the top. He was told that he's too close to the neighbors and other excuses like that, and to this day, he doesn't have that. Now, he did get to cover in his porch because everybody else was covering in their porch. So you never know around here. That's why I've asked for a list of all the people that one way or another applied for Section 10.6 ZBA approvals and either got them or didn't. We'll take a good look at the history over the last 22 years. When we get the Freedom of Information request answered, may take some time. We might have to delay some meetings. Perhaps we can delay the public hearing until we get the information that we need to present to the property owners in our town and city. I have heard on some of the tapes that I received from Town Hall, at least one of them, that the whole issue of perviousness is in question, and perhaps you will have to use a special, perhaps expensive, way to cover your driveways and other areas where you used to use stone, pebbles, and things like that. They may not pass the new definition of pervious, and they may increase your cost and not save the lake very much. We're going to find out more about this pervious. I'm going to ask for a definition of that and what sort of materials would be used to be able to comply with the definition of pervious in the new regulations. Another interesting thing is the height of a building. We have rules for the height of a building, but there are rumors, and I haven't been able to trace it down yet in the regs, that if you have a property that's in front of somebody else's property on the other side of the street and you're blocking their view from the lake or from any other scenic area, that you won't be able to go up as high as perhaps people did in the past. So that's something I will ask for a definition on as well, and we'll try to get that squared away. We want to make sure that we know what all the rules are before we go to the public hearing. Now, when you deal with any of these commissions, especially planning and zoning and ZBA, the burden of proof is always on you. You have to get the engineer to explain the regulations to you. You have to get an attorney to defend you with an engineer, just like the people at 636 East Wakefield had to do for a year or two to get their permission. These commissions don't like to explain things. They say they're too complex. They're not black and white, etc., etc. But I also think that at times that's a way to pass the buck, because many people have told me they have dropped their requests to add a garage or close in a porch or add a room or anything like that, or even go up a little higher with their house because they didn't want to pay a lawyer and an engineer. I've always been of the school of thought that says, let's tell people what they can and can't have so they can come to the meetings prepared, or not come to the meetings at all if they don't want to be turned down. But they should at least know the rules. I've known people that have come in from all over the country to get permits, not just in planning and zoning or ZBA, but in the wetlands and other commissions and committees. And when they get there, and some of them are engineers and some are lawyers, when they get there they say, oh, you didn't have all the information you needed. You need to go away and come back again another day after preparing yourself using a engineer or a lawyer or both if necessary, so that you understand what it is that you're asking for. Many times I've tried to get the commissions to get all that information out to people so they knew exactly what the rules are, especially engineers and lawyers, before they came to a meeting, and wasted everybody's time, including their own, and expense, including their own. So far, I'm getting very good feedback about Steve in his planning director role, because he is working with all sides in the project manager fashion that I mentioned in the last program, to let everybody know what's necessary when they come to these meetings and to help prepare them for the meetings and to try to balance the commissions with the residents and their needs. That's very good. It's frustrating. It's a hard job. Others have done it well, but in a long time failed and got very frustrated. Some even quit over it. But Steve Sedlowski is doing a good job. I'm hoping he sticks with it. We don't know. We'll find out. But if we can all help him by asking questions so that we all understand what we're getting into, then that will be very good for us. So now I want to say, once again, that it isn't easy to pass petitions around. You got to explain to everybody what the petition is for, because they haven't got a clue. And then you got to listen to a half an hour of all their problems and why they had trouble with the commissions in the past 10 or 20 years or 3 or 4 years, and how frustrating it was because all their neighbors, some of their neighbors, got things that they couldn't get. Happens all the time. So you have to listen, make up your mind. And anybody walking around with petitions, which I think you all should be doing within your family, your friends, and neighborhood and all that, you should all be trying to help. You're going to have to listen to their problems. That's an education. It's going to take you half an hour per person, maybe 15 minutes for some. If they don't own property, it won't be a problem whatsoever because they haven't got a clue. And one of the things I notice about the town and the city is that people buy places here and come here, like I did, and don't know what they're getting into until they go for a permit. And they want to put a grandfathered dock back in the water, and they're given all kinds of reasons why they can't, for environmental reasons that turn out not to be very accurate. So I ask you all to listen to these programs, go to the P&Z meetings, ask for copies of their tapes, listen to them, and it's not easy. And if you do go to any meetings with P&Z or ZBA, or even the selectmen, try to speak into the microphone so that your words are recorded. And then when I get the tapes, I can understand what you're saying, I can hear you, and so can others. And then we will pass them around to other people who can hear. But if you don't speak into the microphone, and I made that mistake when I went to the public hearing, I didn't walk up, but there turned out that in P&Z there is no microphone. The people who are sitting at the table, they have microphones, but there's not one for the audience. But I think if you get close enough and you speak loud enough, then people will be able to hear you. And if you listen to the last time when I played a program, some people didn't speak loud at all. I was soft myself a few times until I was asked to come forward and speak louder, which I did do, and that part of it could be heard. So we need to get ready, get in there, speak into the microphone so everybody else can hear when I send it out on to my email list, or anybody else asks the town for a copy that they want to listen to. I'm also trying to contact all the major developers in the area that might want to be developing here over the next few years on properties. That's where all the profitable revenue comes from for our town, most of it. And I want to make sure they're paying attention, and the people who own the property that you're trying to sell or they're trying to get permits for are paying attention. So I kind of know who all those people are. I do have some communication with them. Now I will say that in the past we have had pretty good people in those jobs as planning director, in the wetlands and all those. But most of them got stonewalled for one reason or another and got very frustrated and were either forced out or left. Many of them have told me in the past, Brian, this town doesn't want any development. They're going to make it as hard as possible. They had a big discussion the other night about what they could do with downtown. You can hear that on one of the tapes. I'll be sending that out to my list. Well, in 1990, we had a plan for downtown. And that was a good plan. But it never got accomplished. It never got done. And we're still talking about it to this day. Matter of fact, it's been almost 20 years, I think, that plan's been around. Yet we still can't figure out what to do with our downtown area. So with that, sign the petition, read the petition first, sign it, find somebody who's got one. You can see me if absolutely necessary. I'm pretty busy all the time, but I'll take the time to explain to you what it's about. If you give me your email address, I'll send you copies of my programs. They're going to be on the internet. at Charter Communications. They've been very helpful. And we'll do everything we can to get you prepared for the next public hearing. We'll tell you in advance. Matter of fact, I already told you today that it's in the beginning of September, so keep your eyes open. It will be published in the back of the Waterbury Republican, way in the back in a small little place. And it'll be put on the boards at Town Hall that you never go into except to pay your taxes, or maybe attend a P&Z or ZBA meeting, or an inland wetlands meeting to get a permit. So with that, I'll say, please show up for the public hearing well prepared, and let's get a balanced set of new P&Z regulations. Thank you very much. Brian O'Haron. See you next week. P.S. Take some no-dos before you go to the meeting.